Now we're going to look at one of the most powerful tools in Capital IQ, which is the screening section. Screening is where we can look for companies, we can look for transactions like mergers and acquisitions or private placements, and we can generate ideas. So if we work in investment banking, investment management, private equity, or at a corporation, so we're talking about almost the full suite of financial careers that CFI trains to, you can generate ideas for all these types of jobs in here. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time here in the screening tool. Let's click into screening right now. And we could start somewhere like company screening. And this is where we're going to set criteria. So imagine that we're looking for a company in a particular industry, and we don't know the company's name or its competitors. This is why we're using the screening tool. We're trying to find these companies. Now, one way to do this would be to search for based on the company's business description. So we can go to business descriptions, and you can search for keywords in the business description. So let's say we want to search for businesses that are in cloud computing. Let's add this criteria. So the business description must contain cloud. You can see we get a lot of results here, 27,000 businesses that have cloud in the business description. Well, we want to quickly narrow this down. So let's add some other criteria. Let's say we only want public companies. Okay, so we can add company type, must be public company, add that to the screen. Right away, that cuts the list way down to 1,700. Now let's put some size parameters on it. Let's say the market cap has to be greater than a certain number. So we're going to say the market capitalization must be greater than, and remember that the units that are used as default in Capital IQ are millions. So let's say we want to look at a billion market cap. Okay, must be greater than a billion. Add that to the screen. Now we just have 500 companies. Let's think of what else we might want to add. Let's look at location. How about that? Let's say we are only looking for companies that are in European developed markets. Okay, and now we're down to 62. Now this looks like a reasonable list that we could start to work with. So we're going to click on View Results. So now what we get is this list with a default set of columns that display information. And in the next lesson, we're going to look at customizing these. But for now, we've got our list of 62 companies in cloud computing that are public, that are based in European developed markets with a market cap that's greater than $1 billion. Here we are with our list of 62 companies in cloud computing. And what we're going to do now is adjust the columns here that display the output information. So let's click on Add or Edit. We definitely want to have the business description, the company type, the market cap, geographic locations. Those are all helpful. But let's add revenue as well. So we're clicking here for total revenue. Let's choose now the time period. We could have last 12 months, latest annual. Let's go for last 12 months and then add to screen. So there we see over on the right here, the total trailing revenue for the last 12 months. Let's see, so revenue is helpful. Let's add EBITDA. Last 12 months. And then let's also add net income. All right, so there's all sorts of things you can add, of course, to these output columns, but this is a good starting point. We've now got, the company's business description, its market cap, its revenue, its profitability, and so on. So that gives us a pretty good sense of things. Let's export this list to Excel now. All right, here's the list. Let's just resize this. Let's zoom in a little. There you go. Let's tighten up these columns a bit. Except for the business description, which we'll make bigger, and the company name. So there we go. We've got here our list of companies, their tickers, business descriptions, and then we've got here their financial information. So we could go through and sort this list, or we could look through it manually. It's a manageable size with 62 companies. So say we were looking for companies to invest in or to acquire, we might want to read the business description if we're looking for something specific in cloud computing. And we may want to add a revenue requirement as well, a minimum or a maximum or something like that. And then we're starting to build a pretty interesting list for our specific cloud computing search. Now let's go under screening to transactions. That will pull up the screen that you see here. Let's look for M&A transactions. So if we click on M&A deals, we'll use valuations as a criteria. So you see all these categories here. We can see that the total transaction value is selected here. And let's say we want it to be greater than $1 billion. Remember, the units in CapIQ are millions by default. Let's add that criteria. And we get some huge number, right? 52,000 transactions. That's because all we've set as criteria is that it's greater than $1 billion. But let's add some other criteria just as we did with the company screening. So let's look for public companies only. And let's say that the buyer, we could say that the buyer and the target are public, but in this case, let's say just that the target is public. That narrows it down to 20,000. Let's also select that the buyer is public. So we've added that to the screen. There we go. Now let's add business description. The keyword is cloud. And we want that to be for the target. Add to screen. And once again, let's focus in Europe. Let's have all of Europe. And we could say that that's the headquarters of the target. So that results in 5 transactions. Maybe that's a bit too narrow. Why don't we remove that requirement and just take this list of 44. Let's click View Results. So here we go. Here are the 44 transactions for targets that had cloud in their business description over $1 billion. Here's our output screen. At this point, we may want to edit the display columns. In terms of the things that are outputted here in these columns, let's say we want to know what the TEV to EBITDA multiple was that was paid. For the target. And let's also add the enterprise value to revenue ratio, again for the target. Let's update the results. And if we scroll across, we can see the EBITDA multiples and revenue multiples of the targets. So that might be helpful in putting together a table of precedent transactions. And of course, you can export this to Excel as we did last time. And here it is for you in Excel with all of these transactions. And of course, you can filter through them, maybe delete the ones that are canceled and just look at the ones that closed. And you may look at valuations then based on certain types of comparable precedent transactions that you're looking for. So we've looked at how to do some specific screens for finding companies and transactions. Now let's look at the idea generation tool. The concept behind this tool is that there are a bunch of preloaded screens that you can use to look for ideas for business development. So if you work in investment banking, let's click into investment banking, you can see some of these pre-created screens that they've built for us. And if we scroll down, we can see the name of them, and they're pretty self-explanatory. So we can look for acquisitions of businesses by business keyword. We can look for active financial buyers. We can look for bankruptcies. We can look for canceled LBO deals. Let's look at companies that are actively divesting assets. As an investment banker, you may want to approach companies that are actively divesting assets, and you may want to look for opportunities for your existing clients that, say, may want to purchase assets. There could be some interesting business development opportunities here. So you can see the screen criteria that's set up here. You can always further refine the screening by adding some of your own items here and then viewing the results. So here we can see companies and the number of transactions where they've been a seller in the last 12 months. Let's go back to screening. Now let's look at investment management. We may want to look for bankruptcies, for interesting turnaround situations. We could look at CEOs with pedigree, for example. If we believe that the management team and their pedigree is really important for our investment strategy, that is something where we could look into this. So what the screen is saying is it's saying, first of all, look for all professionals with the job title that is CEO. So essentially find all CEOs. And they have a market capitalization that's less than $1 billion. And they have had previous experience as a chief executive officer or a president or head of investor relations or investment banking or whatever else you want to add to this criteria. So that's how you can build up a history or track record for a CEO and look for CEOs with certain types of experience if you think that is relevant to your investment style. Now let's look at idea generation for private equity and venture capital. We can look for, again, canceled LBOs. We can look for companies with more than 10 investors who have beat or missed their estimates. That sounds interesting. So you can see here, you can set a certain criteria for the size of the beat of EPS, whether it's greater than or less than their guidance or estimates. That's also an interesting screen that you could run. So you can play around with idea generation for whatever industry you're in to come up with ideas to find new business opportunities. So as you've seen now through several examples, the screening section is one of the most powerful areas of Capital IQ.